Hi, Neil Lazarus here, and I wanted to welcome you to another podcast. In this podcast, we will be looking at a number of stories. One, the Balfour Declaration. Two, what the hell is going on in Lebanon with the resignation of the Prime Minister? And thirdly, to look at the growth of Iranian power in the Middle East. I just came back from a tour of Britain, Canada, and the United States. It was record-setting for one reason. I actually lost my suitcase twice in one visit, which is unbelievable, but that's another story. Look, first of all, I don't understand how the Balfour Declaration is being celebrated and was celebrated while I was in Britain by the British Jewish community in such a way that it is crazy. For those of you not familiar, because you're not, that made sense. I think I'm very jet lagged still, but still, bear with me. If you're not familiar with the Balfour Declaration was a declaration by Lord Balfour in 1917, which recognised for the first time Jewish rights to a homeland in Palestine, whilst not endangering the rights of the what would then become called the Palestinians. If you're not familiar, or if you want more information on it, look up Balfour 100. The Brits actually came up with quite a good website on background information there, so just Google Balfour 100. Second of all, if you would listen carefully to many of the speeches, and the Brits know how to do pomp and circumstance, you would imagine that Britain was responsible for recognising and creating the Jewish state. Look, the reality is the Balfour Declaration may have recognised Jewish rights to the lands. It didn't give birth to them. Jewish claim to the land goes back for thousands of years. If you're religious, it's a God-given right. If you're not religious, it's just a historic right. But you would imagine that Balfour, by giving his declaration, gave birth to the recognition of a state of Israel, that it was the fertilization of the Jewish state. I gotta tell you, the Brits do a load of BS or BDS. Really, what? Come on. It's crazy. Look, the reality is something else. The British, and ignore my accent, but the British, for the next half a century, were turning boats of refugees away from the shores of Palestine. So I don't think really the British community got it. I'd love to hear your answers. Remember, you can Twitter me at Awesome Seminars. You can also send me a message via my website, awesomeseminars.com. I'd love to know what you think, because I really, really do think that the British Jewish community got it wrong, and I think it was wrong that the Israeli government and the embassy there actually supported them in this endeavour, because at the end of the day, like I keep saying, it strengthened the narrative that somehow Israel was created as a part of an imperial scheme by Britain and France. Not true, isn't true, but I think perhaps the British Jewish community strengthened that perception. Whew, now I've got that off my chest, we can carry on. By the way, I was glad to hear that quite a few people agree with me on that. Second of issue is really what's happening in Lebanon, and I think that this, together with what's happening with Iran in Syria, is very, very important. And really that's the emphasis of this podcast today. If you remember, we had Prime Minister Hariri resigning, and ending up in Saudi Arabia. If that wasn't crazy enough, he then claimed, or the press claimed, that he was being held there. Reality is he now made a visit to France, and at the time of podcasting, he's promised to go back to Saudi Arabia. His reason for resignation was that the Hezbollah, that Iranian-backed group in Lebanon, was getting too strong and threatening to assassinate him. Look, I think in many ways this is just a symptom of a larger problem, which is the rise of the Iranian-Saudi battle in the Middle East. I remind you, and there's so much small detail but important. If you have a look today, the major power battle in the Middle East is between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And what the Iranians and Saudis are doing is fighting each other in other people's countries using other people's troops. So what we're seeing in Lebanon in many ways is a reflection of that power battle. From an Israeli perspective, the rise of Iranian bases and the building of Iranian bases in Syria, not Lebanon, in Syria, is remarkably problematic. And everyone is looking over our northern border, because what we're seeing today is the entrenchment of Iran in Syria. Israel cannot afford to allow Iran to take over Syria, even by proxy, as the same way it did in Lebanon via Hezbollah and Nasrallah. So we have a huge issue emerging there, and let alone Saudi being rocketed and declaring that rocketing by Iranian-backed forces a declaration of war. So if you're looking and listening to this podcast for tips on where to look and how to read your news, which I always say this is my main interest is, there are many sites out there which provide you with information, etc. I've always, and when I teach and I provide, seminars on the subject, as you know, I try to give the tools for understanding. So I want you to concentrate on the Saudi-Iranian battle at the moment. For those of you familiar with my work, the middle part of the sandwich, because that is the axis of which everything else is now balancing. The question is, will Israel be drawn into a war over its northern border in order to prevent Iran from stabilizing and entrenching itself within Syria today? Look, the Hezbollah is remarkably worried. They yesterday, so it was reported, gave orders to stop flying weapons from Iran to Lebanon via Syria because they feared attack, which again shows you how delicate it is. If you looked at Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman, he, and it's not by coincidence, was filmed in the north talking about the threat from Syria, saying that Syria shouldn't allow Iran to entrench itself. So all of it is remarkably fascinating, and I need you to concentrate on that. A developing story last night, which I thought was interesting, was also, and it was released by the Israeli press, and I'm not sure it made it to international news yet, was the so-called Trump plan that is emerging vis-a-vis the Palestinians. That Trump would recognize a Palestinian state, yet the Sunni countries would invest in it, not necessarily on the 67 lines. Moreover, that Jewish settlers would not be forced to leave. How all of that's going to work, who knows? I don't quite see this happening. But these are the outlines which seem to be emerging. And at the same time, if the Palestinians take Israel to the international court, Trump will close the offices of the PLO in Washington, which in return we saw Saud Arakat threatening to boycott this American administration. It's leaks of leaks of leaks, so I'm telling you what's being reported. Again, keep an eye out on that track, because I think it's going to be an interesting developing story. It does explain why Israel, and especially this Prime Minister Netanyahu, seeks at every opportunity to get the approval of Donald Trump, even at the cost of losing the support of American Jewry. I think that's where we are today. I wanted to touch base with you guys. I know I haven't been podcasting enough. I stand reprimanded. I promise to be in touch. Like I said, we're already setting up, I didn't mention, but I'm already setting up more tours. I'm going to be back in all three countries I mentioned before, probably in February. But most interesting is I have a crazy winter ahead in Israel. So if you are coming to Israel, I look forward to meeting you there. And at the same time, if you want to put some people together, I can happily podcast for you, or webcast. So not only can you listen to this, you can see these things too. All of that is quite interesting and exciting, and I've got quite a few of those coming up in a while. Anyway, like I said, just wanted to chat, and I hope everything is okay with you guys. Let me know. Keep in touch. It was fun to actually speak to people about my podcast, and actually get a feeling that someone is listening to this and said they enjoyed it. Not only that. So thanks very much. Let me know what you think. Facebook me. You can also, like I said, be in contact via Twitter. Until next time, we'll speak again soon.
Neil Lazarus. Educating, motivating, challenging.